Millionaire is fired for granting his sick maid a day off until her 7-year-old daughter exposes a 921 meters fraud in court, leaving everyone stunned. Before we unfold this sorrowful story of isolation and grief, comment your location and subscribe for more emotional journeys. The mahogany conference table shook as Michael Harrison's fist crashed down, his face flushed with disbelief. "You're firing me from my own company." Board member Patricia Wells avoided his piercing blue eyes, her voice barely above a whisper. "The shareholders voted, Michael, effective immediately." "For what? Giving Maria a day off when her daughter was in the hospital?" Michael's voice cracked with emotion. At 32, he'd built Harrison Tech Solutions from nothing, turning a garage startup into a $50 million empire. Now, 5 men in expensive suits sat across from him like vultures circling roadkill. "It's about fiscal responsibility," said Robert Chen, the lead investor. "Your emotional decision-making has cost us clients." Michael laughed bitterly. "Maria's been cleaning these offices for 3 years without a single sick day. Her 8-year-old daughter needed surgery, and I gave her 1 day off with pay. That's your definition of fiscal irresponsibility?" The room fell silent, except for the steady tick of the antique clock his grandfather had given him. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Seattle's skyline stretched endlessly, a testament to dreams built and destroyed. "The decision is final," Wells said, sliding a thick envelope across the table. "Security will escort you out." Michael stared at the severance papers, his hands trembling with rage. This wasn't just about Maria. Something deeper was happening here. The vote had been too swift, too coordinated. These people had been planning this. "You'll regret this," he whispered, grabbing his leather briefcase. "When you realize what you've done, it'll be too late." As security flanked him through the lobby he'd designed himself, past the motivational quotes he'd personally chosen, Michael's mind raced. His phone buzzed, a text from his ex-wife, Sarah. "Emma's asking when you're picking her up. She made you a drawing." His 7-year-old daughter, the only pure thing left in his rapidly crumbling world. How would he explain that Daddy's big company didn't want him anymore? Outside in the drizzling rain, Michael looked back at the gleaming Harrison Tech building. Something wasn't right about today. The timing, the coordination, the almost rehearsed responses from the board. Someone had orchestrated this carefully, but who and why? His phone rang, an unknown number. "Mr. Harrison? This is Judge William Crawford's office. You're required to appear in court Monday morning at 9 a.m. sharp. Failure to appear will result in a warrant for your arrest." The line went dead before Michael could ask why. Standing in the rain, briefcase in hand, Michael Harrison realized his nightmare was just beginning. Emma Harrison pressed her small nose against the cold kitchen window, watching for her father's silver BMW. At 7 years old, she understood more than adults gave her credit for, especially when it came to reading people's faces and voices. "Daddy sounds sad," she told her stuffed elephant, Mr. Peanuts, adjusting his tiny red bow tie. "But he's trying to hide it." The front door opened with its familiar creak, and Emma rushed into her father's arms. Michael lifted her high, spinning once before setting her down, but she noticed his smile didn't reach his eyes like usual. "Hey, sunshine, how was school today? Mrs. Peterson taught us about being detectives." Emma bounced excitedly. "She said good detectives notice everything and ask lots of questions. Look what I made you." She handed him a crayon drawing, a stick figure in a suit standing next to a little girl with pigtails, both smiling under a rainbow. At the bottom, in her careful 7-year-old handwriting, "My daddy is the best boss ever." Michael's throat tightened. He knelt down to Emma's level, studying her serious brown eyes, so much like his own. "Emma, Daddy needs to tell you something important. I'm not going to be the boss anymore." Her face scrunched in confusion. "Did you get in trouble?" "Something like that, sweetheart. But everything's going to be okay." Emma tilted her head, processing this information with the intensity she applied to everything. "The mean people at work don't deserve you anyway, Daddy. You're too good for them." Later that evening, While Emma played in her room, Michael sat at his home office desk, staring at the court summons. Judge William Crawford. He'd never heard the name before. The citation mentioned corporate malfeasance and fiduciary violations, legal jargon that made no sense given the circumstances. "Daddy?" Emma appeared in the doorway, clutching Mr. Peanuts. "Why do you look worried?" "Just some grown-up stuff, Sunshine. Nothing for you to worry about." But Emma was already studying the papers on his desk with her characteristic intensity. "What's malfeasance mean?" "It means doing something wrong on purpose." "But you never do anything wrong on purpose." Emma's voice rose with indignation. "You helped Mrs. Martinez when she couldn't afford her medicine, and you let everyone leave early when it snowed, and you always share your lunch with Tommy from security." Michael pulled his daughter onto his lap, amazed as always by her fierce loyalty and sharp memory. "Sometimes good people get accused of bad things, Emma. That's why we have judges and courts, to figure out the truth." Emma nodded solemnly, then whispered, "Daddy, what if the judge is wrong? What if he doesn't believe you're good?" The question hit Michael like a physical blow. What if, indeed, he'd built his entire life on the principle that hard work and integrity would prevail, but today had shaken that foundation? "Then we'll prove I'm telling the truth," he said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. Emma studied his face with those wise brown eyes. "I'll help you prove it, Daddy. Detective Emma is on the case." Despite everything, Michael smiled. His daughter's unwavering faith gave him strength he didn't know he still possessed. Judge William Crawford adjusted his black robes and stared at his reflection in the courthouse bathroom mirror. At 58, his silver hair and weathered face commanded respect, but his pale blue eyes held secrets that could destroy everything he'd built. 23 years on the bench, he whispered to himself. "Not now, not when I'm so close." The Harrison case was supposed to be simple, a routine corporate dispute that would end with the young entrepreneur bankrupted and disgraced. But Crawford's phone had been buzzing all morning, with increasingly urgent messages from his anonymous benefactor. "The girl is a problem," the latest text read. "She asks too many questions. Handle it." Crawford's hands shook as he deleted the message. He'd never intended for children to get involved, but Harrison's 7-year-old daughter had been present during several key conversations. Children notice things, remembered details that adults dismissed. A knock on the bathroom door interrupted his thoughts. "Your Honor, the Harrison case is scheduled to begin in 10 minutes. "I'll be right there," Crawford called, splashing cold water on his face. Meanwhile, in the courthouse lobby, Michael Harrison straightened his navy blue tie and tried to project confidence he didn't feel. His lawyer, David Murphy, a public defender who looked barely old enough to graduate law school, shuffled through a stack of hastily assembled paperwork. "I'll be honest with you, Mr. Harrison," Murphy said quietly. "This case doesn't make sense. The charges are vague, the evidence is circumstantial, and the timing is suspicious. But Judge Crawford has a reputation for being unforgiving." Michael watched families and lawyers move through the marble hallway, everyone focused on their own dramas and crises. "What do you know about Crawford?" 23 years on the bench, excellent reputation, never been overturned on appeal. But Murphy hesitated. "But what?" "There are rumors, nothing concrete, but some attorneys whisper about cases where his rulings seemed predetermined, like he'd already made up his mind before hearing the evidence." A chill ran down Michael's spine. "And today you're facing a judge who's already decided you're guilty." As they entered the courtroom, Michael's phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Emma insists on coming to court tomorrow, says she wants to see justice happen. I couldn't talk her out of it." Michael stared at the message, torn between pride in his daughter's courage and terror at the thought of her witnessing his potential destruction. Judge Crawford took the bench, his imposing presence filling the room. When his eyes met Michael's, there was something there, not just professional distance, but personal hatred, raw, burning animosity that seemed completely disproportionate to a corporate dispute. "Mr. Harrison," Crawford's voice boomed through the courtroom, You stand accused of corporate malfeasance, breach of fiduciary duty, and fraud totaling $921 million. The number hit Michael like a sledgehammer. 921 million. His entire company wasn't worth half that amount. This wasn't just a mistake, this was deliberate destruction. How do you plead? Michael stood on unsteady legs, his world tilting off its axis. Not guilty, Your Honor. Completely, absolutely not guilty. Crawford's thin smile held no warmth. We'll see about that, Mr. Harrison. We'll see about that. As the judge outlined the trial schedule, Michael realized he was trapped in something far more sinister than a simple, wrongful termination. Someone wanted him destroyed completely, and Judge William Crawford was their weapon of choice. Emma Harrison sat in the hard wooden pew of the courthouse, her legs swinging freely as she observed everything with the sharp eyes of a born detective. She'd convinced her mother to let her attend by promising to stay quiet and behave, but staying quiet didn't mean she wasn't learning. The judge doesn't like Daddy, she whispered to Mr. Peanuts, who was hidden in her small backpack. His face gets angry when he looks at him. Sarah Harrison squeezed her daughter's hand. Sometimes adults have to make difficult decisions, sweetheart. That doesn't mean they don't like someone. But Emma wasn't convinced. She'd spent years watching people's faces, learning to read the subtle signs that adults thought children couldn't understand. Judge Crawford's expression when he looked at her father wasn't just professional sternness. It was personal dislike, maybe even hatred. During the lunch recess, Emma overheard two lawyers talking in the hallway. Crawford's being unusually harsh, one said, even for him. 900 million in damages. The kid's company isn't worth a tenth of that. Someone wants Harrison destroyed, and Crawford's the executioner. Emma didn't understand all the words, but she understood the meaning. Someone was trying to hurt her daddy on purpose, and the judge was helping them do it. That evening, while Michael worked late in his study reviewing legal documents, Emma crept downstairs with her tablet. She'd learned to use the internet for school projects, but tonight she had a different kind of research in mind. Detective Emma's first rule, she whispered to herself, remembering Mrs. Peterson's lesson. Find out everything about the people involved. She typed carefully, Judge William Crawford, Seattle. And the search results showed official courthouse photos, news articles about various cases, and a brief biography. Born in Portland, graduated from University of Washington Law School, appointed to the bench 23 years ago. Married to Helen Crawford, no children. Emma frowned. Why would someone with no children understand what it felt like to have a daddy in trouble? She clicked on the news articles, sounding out difficult words slowly. Most were boring legal stuff, but one headline caught her attention. Judge Crawford's controversial ruling in Riverside Development case saves local park. The article was 3 years old and mentioned that Crawford had ruled against a major development company, preventing them from building condominiums on land that became a children's park instead. The company's owner was quoted as being devastated by the judge's obvious bias and personal vendetta. Emma's heart started beating faster. The company owner's name was Harrison. Not her daddy, but someone with the same last name. She scrolled down to find more details. Richard Harrison, chairman of Harrison Development Group, expressed outrage at what he called a predetermined ruling that ignored legal precedent and sound business practices. The Harrison claimed Judge Crawford had a personal grudge against his family name. Emma stared at the screen, her 7-year-old mind processing this information. Richard Harrison. Could he be related to her daddy? And if Judge Crawford hated someone named Harrison before, maybe that's why he hated her daddy now. She quickly typed Michael Harrison, Richard Harrison family, but found nothing connecting them. Still, the coincidence seemed too big to ignore. Emma, what are you doing up so late? Her father's voice startled her. Daddy, I was researching. Emma closed the tablet quickly, but not before Michael caught a glimpse of Judge Crawford's photo on the screen. Researching what? Sunshine? Michael sat beside her on the couch, concern evident in his voice. The judge. I think he doesn't like people named Harrison. Emma's words tumbled out in a rush. There was another Harrison man 3 years ago, and the judge made a mean ruling against him, and now he's being mean to you too." Michael stared at his daughter, amazed by her deductive reasoning. "Emma, that's actually very interesting detective work. But correlation doesn't always mean causation." "What's that mean?" "It means just because two things happen together doesn't mean one caused the other." But even as he said it, Michael wondered if his 7-year-old daughter had stumbled onto something significant. Emma yawned, her excitement giving way to tiredness. "Daddy, tomorrow I want to watch the judge's face real carefully. Detective Emma thinks he's hiding something." As Michael tucked his daughter into bed, her innocent words echoed in his mind. Children saw things adults missed, noticed patterns that escaped trained observers. Maybe Emma was onto something after all. The courthouse felt different on the second day of trial. Emma sat in the gallery with her mother, but this time she came prepared. Hidden in her school backpack, alongside Mr. Peanuts, was a small notebook and her favorite purple pen. She'd told her mother it was for drawing, but Detective Emma had a different purpose in mind. Judge Crawford entered the courtroom with his usual commanding presence, but Emma was watching everything now. His facial expressions, his body language, even where his eyes went when he thought no one was looking. "Page 1, she wrote carefully in her notebook. "Judge looks at Daddy with mean eyes, looks at prosecutor with happy eyes, looks at ceiling when Daddy's lawyer talks." The morning proceeded with testimony from Harrison Tech's former employees. One by one, they painted a picture of Michael as a caring but sometimes impulsive boss who made decisions based on emotion rather than pure business logic. "He gave me a raise when my wife had cancer," testified James Martinez, the security guard. "Said it was a performance bonus, but I knew it was because he heard about our medical bills." Emma watched Judge Crawford's face tighten with each positive testimony. She wrote, "Judge gets angrier when people say nice things about Daddy." During cross-examination, the prosecutor, a sharp-faced woman named Ms. Kelly, twisted each act of kindness into evidence of financial irresponsibility. So Mr. Harrison regularly gave unauthorized bonuses and raises based on personal circumstances rather than company policy. Well, yes, and these decisions were made without board approval. He was the CEO. "Thank you. No further questions." Emma's pen moved quickly. "Mean lady lawyer cuts people off when they try to say good things." But it was during the afternoon session that Emma made her most important observation. The prosecutor had called a surprise witness, Robert Chen, the board member who'd led the vote to fire Michael. As Chen took the stand, Emma noticed something strange. Just before he began testifying, Judge Crawford reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. He glanced at it quickly, then looked directly at Chen and gave an almost imperceptible nod. Emma's eyes widened. She'd seen her mum do the same thing when coordinating with her friends, a quick check of messages followed by a subtle signal. But judges weren't supposed to talk to witnesses, were they? "Page 3, she wrote. Judge checked phone, then nodded at boardman. They know each other. Chen's testimony was devastating. He described Michael as reckless, emotional, and financially irresponsible. He presented documents showing questionable expenditures and unauthorized payments to employees. "This pattern of behavior," Chen said, looking directly at Judge Crawford, "culminated in the alleged embezzlement of $921 million from offshore investment accounts." Michael's lawyer jumped up. "Objection, Your Honor. There's no evidence of embezzlement, and those offshore accounts were legitimate business investments." Crawford's response was swift and harsh. "Overruled. The witness may continue." Emma watched the exchange with growing certainty. Something was very wrong here. She'd seen enough playground conspiracies to recognize the signs. People working together against someone else, secret signals, coordinated attacks. During the next recess, Emma tugged on her mother's sleeve. "Mummy, I need to tell Daddy something important." "Sweetheart, Daddy's talking with his lawyer right now. It's about the judge." Emma's voice was urgent. "He's cheating." Sarah looked alarmed. "Emma, you can't say things like that. Judges don't cheat." But Emma was already pulling away, determined to reach her father. She dodged between adults in the crowded hallway until she found Michael huddled with David Murphy near a window. "Daddy! The judge has a phone and he talks to the board man." Michael knelt down to Emma's level. "What do you mean, sunshine?" Emma opened her notebook, showing him her careful observations. Before the mean board man talked, the judge looked at his phone and then nodded at him. "They have secret signals." Murphy examined the notebook, his young face growing serious. "Mr. Harrison, if this is true, it's judicial misconduct at minimum," Michael finished. "But Emma, are you absolutely sure about what you saw?" Emma nodded solemnly. "Detective Emma is always sure. The judge is cheating to help the mean people win." As they prepared to return to the courtroom, Michael felt a surge of hope mixed with terror. His 7-year-old daughter might have uncovered evidence of corruption, but proving it would be dangerous for all of them. Judge Crawford was more powerful than any of them imagined. The third day of trial began with an unexpected development. Judge Crawford seemed different, more agitated, checking his phone frequently and casting suspicious glances toward the gallery where Emma sat with her notebook. "Detective Emma is making him nervous," she whispered to Mr. Peanuts. "Good detectives always make bad guys nervous." The morning's testimony focused on the mysterious $921 million that formed the heart of the prosecution's case. Ms. Kelly, the prosecutor, presented complex financial documents that supposedly showed Michael had diverted funds from Harrison Tech's overseas investments into personal accounts. But as Emma watched her father's face, she saw something else: genuine confusion and surprise. He wasn't acting like someone who'd been caught stealing. He was acting like someone who'd never seen these documents before in his life. "Daddy doesn't know about this money," Emma wrote in her notebook. "His face is surprised, not scared." Michael's lawyer, Murphy, struggled with the technical financial testimony. He was clearly out of his depth, fumbling with questions about international banking laws and corporate securities regulations. "Mr. Harrison," Crawford interrupted during cross-examination, "do you recognize your signature on these transfer authorizations?" Michael studied the documents through his reading glasses, his brow furrowed. "Your Honor, this appears to be my signature, but I have no memory of signing these particular documents. The dates don't correspond with any transactions I authorized." Crawford's face reddened. "Are you suggesting these documents are forgeries, Mr. Harrison?" "I'm saying I don't remember signing them, and the amounts far exceed any investments my company made overseas." Emma watched the exchange with fascination. The judge was getting angry again, but this time it seemed like panic mixed with rage. She wrote, "Judge scared when Daddy says papers might be fake." During the lunch recess, Emma overheard a conversation that made her blood run cold. She'd gone to the bathroom with her mother, but returned alone when Sarah stopped to talk with another parent. As Emma walked past a partially open door marked Judge's Chambers, she heard Judge Crawford's voice, tense and urgent. "I don't care what it takes," he was saying into his phone. "The Harrison girl is becoming a problem. She watches everything, writes everything down if she figures out." Emma pressed closer to the door, her heart pounding. "No, we can't touch her directly. Too obvious. But maybe we can discredit her father faster, end this trial before she puts the pieces together." The voice on the other end of the phone was too quiet for Emma to hear, but Crawford's response made her stomach twist with fear. 23 years I've been building this. I'm not letting some 7-year-old brat destroy everything now." Emma backed away from the door, her whole body shaking. The judge wasn't just cheating, he was talking about her like she was dangerous. She had to tell her daddy right away, but as she turned to run, she collided with a court security guard. "Whoa there, little lady, you're not supposed to be back here." Emma looked up at the tall man in uniform, trying to decide if she could trust him. "I was looking for the bathroom." "It's down the hall, sweetie. Let me walk you back to your mom." As they walked, Emma's mind raced. She couldn't tell the security guard what she'd heard. He might tell the judge. She needed to get to her daddy, but court was starting again in 5 minutes. Back in the courtroom, Emma caught her father's eye and held up her notebook, tapping it urgently. Michael nodded slightly, understanding that she had something important to share. The afternoon session focused on character witnesses for Michael. Former employees, community members, and business associates testified about his integrity, generosity, and ethical business practices. But Judge Crawford seemed determined to undermine each positive testimony. "Mr. Martinez," Crawford addressed the security guard, "isn't it true that Mr. Harrison's so-called generosity was actually a pattern of financial mismanagement that contributed to the company's vulnerability to embezzlement?" "No, Your Honor, that's not—" "I'll ask the questions here, Mr. Martinez." Emma watched her father's shoulders slump with each hostile interruption. The judge was destroying every attempt to show that her daddy was a good person. As the day ended, Emma finally got her chance. While Michael packed his briefcase, she slipped him her notebook. "Page 4, Daddy, the most important page." Michael read Emma's careful handwriting. "Judge said I am a problem. He talked on phone about stopping me from figuring out his secrets. He said I am a brat who will destroy everything. He is scared of Detective Emma." Michael's hands trembled as he read his daughter's words. Emma had overheard Judge Crawford discussing her personally, admitting to some kind of conspiracy that involved destroying the Harrison family. "Emma," Michael whispered, kneeling beside her chair, "this is very dangerous. If the judge knows you're watching him, he's the one doing bad things, Daddy, not us." Emma's 7-year-old voice held fierce determination. Detective Emma isn't scared of bullies, even grown-up ones. As they left the courthouse that evening, Michael realized the stakes had just escalated beyond anything he'd imagined. His daughter had uncovered evidence of judicial corruption, but now she was in danger. Judge Crawford knew Emma was onto him, and desperate people did desperate things. The real battle was just beginning. The 4th day of trial brought an unexpected visitor to the Harrison household. Emma was eating her Lucky Charms cereal when the doorbell rang at 7 in the morning. Through the peephole, Sarah saw a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and graying hair. "Mrs. Harrison, I'm Helen Crawford, Judge Crawford's wife. I need to speak with you about your daughter's safety." Sarah's blood ran cold, but she opened the door. Helen Crawford looked exhausted, her hands shaking as she clutched a manila envelope. "I know this sounds crazy," Helen said, glancing nervously over her shoulder, "but Emma is in real danger. My husband, he's not the man I married 30 years ago." Emma appeared in the hallway, her detective instincts immediately alert. "You're the judge's wife. Why are you here?" Helen knelt down to Emma's level. "Because you're a very smart little girl, and smart little girls sometimes discover things that powerful people want to keep secret." "What kind of things?" Emma asked, her brown eyes intense with curiosity. Helen looked at Sarah, then back at Emma. "Things about money that doesn't belong to where it's supposed to be. Things about judges who make deals with bad people. Things that could send my husband to prison for the rest of his life." Sarah pulled Emma closer. "Mrs. Crawford, what exactly are you telling us?" 3 years ago, my husband made an enemy of a very wealthy, very dangerous man named Richard Harrison. No relation to your family, but the same last name. Richard owns Harrison Development Group, and when William ruled against his construction project, Richard swore revenge." Emma's eyes widened. "I found that story on the internet. The judge saved the park from the mean building man." "Yes, sweetheart, but what you didn't find was what happened after. Richard Harrison didn't just get angry. He got even. He's been paying my husband for 3 years to destroy anyone with the Harrison name who crosses his path." The revelation hit like a thunderbolt. Sarah sank onto the couch, pulling Emma with her. "You're saying your husband is taking bribes?" Helen nodded, tears streaming down her face. $921 million in bribes funneled through offshore accounts and shell companies. Richard Harrison has been systematically destroying successful businesses owned by people named Harrison, and my husband has been his weapon in the legal system. Emma jumped up, her notebook in hand. "That's why he hates Daddy. It's not about Daddy doing anything wrong. It's about Daddy having the same name as the building man." "Exactly," Helen said. But Emma, your detective work has scared them. Richard knows someone is getting close to the truth, and desperate men do desperate things. Sarah felt sick. Are you saying they might hurt Emma? I'm saying you need to disappear. Today. Right now. Take Emma and run until this is over. But Emma crossed her arms defiantly. No, running away is what scared people do. Detective Emma isn't scared, and besides, Daddy needs our help. Helen opened the manila envelope, revealing bank statements, recorded phone conversations, and photographs of secret meetings. This is everything I've gathered over the past year. Evidence of every bribe, every fixed case, every innocent person my husband destroyed for Richard Harrison's revenge. Emma studied the documents with the same intensity she brought to her homework. Mrs. Crawford, why are you helping us? He's your husband. Helen's voice broke. Because 30 years ago, I married a good man who believed in justice. The man living in my house now isn't that person anymore. He's become a monster, and monsters need to be stopped. At the courthouse, Michael paced nervously outside the courtroom. Murphy had called in sick. Food poisoning, he claimed, leaving Michael to represent himself against charges he still didn't understand. Judge Crawford took the bench with his usual commanding presence. But today, there was something different in his pale blue eyes. Desperation mixed with determination, like a cornered animal preparing for its final stand. Mr. Harrison, Crawford announced, in light of new evidence that has come to my attention, I'm accelerating this trial. We will hear closing arguments today and reach a verdict immediately. Michael shot to his feet. Your Honor, I haven't had adequate time to prepare a defense. My attorney is ill and the court is not interested in delays, Mr. Harrison. You've had 3 days to present your case. If you're unprepared, that's your own failing. In the gallery, Emma watched the exchange with growing alarm. The judge was rushing everything now, trying to end the trial before she could expose him. She pulled out her notebook and wrote, "Judge is scared and moving fast. Detective Emma running out of time." But as Crawford began outlining the accelerated schedule, the courtroom doors burst open. Helen Crawford entered carrying her manila envelope, followed by 2 FBI agents in dark suits. "Your Honor," Helen called out, her voice carrying across the stunned courtroom. "This trial needs to stop immediately." Crawford's face went white. "Helen, what are you doing here?" Stopping a travesty of justice," she replied, walking straight to the prosecutor's table. "Agent Martinez, Agent Thompson, I believe you'll find these documents very interesting." Emma watched with fascination as her father's case transformed before her eyes. The FBI agents examined Helen's evidence while whispering urgently among themselves. Judge Crawford sat frozen on his bench, his commanding presence crumbling with each passing second. "Ladies and gentlemen of the court," Agent Martinez announced, "by order of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, this trial is hereby suspended, pending a federal investigation into judicial corruption and conspiracy to commit fraud." The courtroom erupted in chaos, but Emma only had eyes for her father. Michael Harrison stood in the middle of it all, finally understanding that his 7-year-old daughter's detective work had not only saved him, it had exposed a conspiracy that reached far beyond their family. Judge Crawford was no longer a powerful figure of justice. He was just another criminal about to face the consequences of his choices. The FBI field office in downtown Seattle buzzed with activity as Agent Maria Martinez spread Helen Crawford's evidence across a conference table. Emma sat between her parents, swinging her legs from the adult-sized chair, her detective notebook open in front of her. "This is remarkable," Agent Martinez said, studying Emma's carefully documented observations. Most trained investigators wouldn't have caught these behavioral patterns and communication signals. Emma beamed with pride. Detective Emma always pays attention to everything. Agent Thompson, a tall man with kind eyes, addressed Michael directly. "Mr. Harrison, you're the victim of an elaborate conspiracy spanning 3 years. Richard Harrison of Harrison Development Group has been systematically targeting individuals with your surname as revenge against Judge Crawford's ruling in 2021. Michael shook his head in disbelief. But why target random people named Harrison? That's insane. Revenge doesn't always follow logical patterns, Agent Martinez explained. Richard Harrison lost $200 million when Judge Crawford blocked his Riverside development project. But instead of accepting the loss, he decided to corrupt Crawford and use him to destroy other successful people named Harrison. Emma raised her small hand like she was in school. Agent Martinez, how many other people got hurt? The agent's expression grew somber. 17 businesses owned by people named Harrison have been destroyed through fraudulent lawsuits over the past 3 years. Families ruined, careers ended, lives shattered, all because they shared a surname with someone who had nothing to do with the original conflict. Sarah gasped. 17 families. This is monstrous. Helen Crawford, who had been sitting quietly in the corner, finally spoke. I tried to stop him. Stop. For 2 years, I begged William to end this madness. But the money, $921 million in total payments from Richard Harrison, it corrupted him completely. Agent Thompson opened a thick file folder. Mrs. Crawford, your evidence is comprehensive, but we need to understand the full scope. Walk us through how this conspiracy operated. Helen took a deep breath, steeling herself to betray 3 decades of marriage. Richard Harrison established a network of shell companies and offshore accounts. Every time someone named Harrison achieved business success in the Pacific Northwest, Richard would manufacture a legal case against them. William would ensure the case came to his courtroom, then rule in favor of whatever plaintiff Richard provided. Emma listened intently, her young mind processing the complexity. So the judge would always make the Harrisons lose? Always, sweetheart. Whether the case had merit or not, William would find a way to rule against anyone named Harrison. Bankruptcy, criminal charges, business closure, whatever it took to destroy them completely. Michael felt sick thinking about the other victims. What happened to their families, their children? Agent Martinez consulted her files. 3 families lost their homes. 5 children had to drop out of college when their parents were bankrupted. 2 businesses that employed hundreds of people were shut down, putting entire communities out of work. The weight of the broader conspiracy settled over the room like a dark cloud. Emma, despite her young age, understood the magnitude of what they'd uncovered. Agent Martinez, Emma said solemnly, what happens to the mean judge now? Judge Crawford will be arrested and charged with conspiracy, bribery, obstruction of justice, and violations of civil rights under color of law. He's looking at 25 years to life in federal prison. Helen Crawford began crying quietly. Despite everything her husband had done, 30 years of marriage couldn't be erased overnight. Emma climbed down from her chair and walked over to the judge's wife. Mrs. Crawford, you did the right thing. Sometimes good people have to stop bad people, even when it makes them sad. Helen hugged Emma tightly. You're a very wise little girl. Your father should be proud. Agent Thompson addressed Michael directly. Mr. Harrison, all charges against you are being dropped immediately. Additionally, the federal government will be seeking restitution from Richard Harrison's assets to compensate you and the other victims. But Emma had another question. What about the mean building man, Richard Harrison? What happens to him? Agent Martinez smiled grimly. Richard Harrison will be facing federal conspiracy charges, racketeering violations, and tax evasion. The IRS is very interested in those offshore accounts he's been using to fund this operation. As the meeting concluded, Michael felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of what his daughter had uncovered. A 7-year-old's curiosity and keen observation had exposed a multi-million-dollar conspiracy that had destroyed dozens of lives. Emma, Agent Martinez said as they prepared to leave, have you ever considered a career in law enforcement? Emma grinned. Detective Emma is always considering new cases. But first, I want to make sure all the other Harrison families know they're going to be okay. Walking out of the FBI building, Michael lifted his daughter high in the air, spinning her around as Seattle's skyline stretched endlessly before them. "You saved us, sunshine. You saved everyone." Emma hugged her father tightly. "That's what detectives do, Daddy. We find the truth and help the good people win." But even as they celebrated, Emma's sharp mind was already thinking about the next challenge, making sure justice was truly served for all the victims of this cruel conspiracy. The case was solved, but Detective Emma's work was far from over. 1 week later, the Seattle courthouse where Michael Harrison had faced destruction was now the scene of a very different kind of drama. Judge William Crawford sat in handcuffs at the defendant's table, his black robes replaced by an orange jumpsuit, his commanding presence reduced to that of a broken old man. Emma sat in the gallery with her parents, her detective notebook ready to document this final chapter of their ordeal. Federal Judge Patricia Williams presided over the proceedings, her stern but fair demeanor a stark contrast to Crawford's corrupt tyranny. "William Crawford," Judge Williams announced, "you stand before this court charged with conspiracy, bribery, obstruction of justice, and deprivation of rights under color of law. How do you plead?" Crawford's voice was barely audible. "Guilty, Your Honor. Guilty to all charges." Emma wrote in her notebook, "Bad judge admits he did bad things. Justice is happening." The prosecution, led by Assistant U.S. Attorney Rebecca Chen, outlined the full scope of the conspiracy for the record. "Your Honor, over a period of 3 years, the defendant accepted $921 million in bribes from Richard Harrison to systematically destroy innocent families, whose only crime was sharing a surname with Mr. Harrison's business rival. One by one, the victims were called to give impact statements. Michael watched in horror as 17 families detailed the devastation Crawford's corruption had caused in their lives. Margaret Harrison, a 67-year-old widow, spoke through tears. "He took everything. My husband's construction business, our home, our retirement savings. We lost 43 years of hard work because a judge decided our name made us enemies." Thomas Harrison, a young father, held his infant daughter as he testified, "My tech startup employed 15 people. Judge Crawford's fraudulent ruling didn't just bankrupt me, it put 15 families out of work during the pandemic." Emma listened to each story, her young heart breaking for these families who had suffered simply because they shared her last name. She wrote, "Too many people got hurt. This is why Detective Emma's job is important." When it was Michael's turn to speak, he stood slowly, looking directly at his former tormentor. "Your Honor, Judge Crawford didn't just try to destroy my business and my livelihood. He put my 7-year-old daughter in danger. He called her a problem and a brat because she was smart enough to see through his lies. A man who would threaten a child to protect his corruption has lost any claim to mercy." Crawford never looked up during Michael's statement, his shoulders shaking with what might have been shame or fear. But the most powerful moment came when Emma herself asked to address the court. Judge Williams hesitated, then allowed the 7-year-old to speak. Emma stood on her tiptoes to reach the microphone, her clear young voice carrying across the silent courtroom. "Your Honor, my name is Emma Harrison, and I'm 7 years old. The bad judge tried to hurt my daddy and lots of other families just because we have the same name as someone he was mad at. That's not fair, and that's not justice." She paused, looking directly at Crawford. "Mrs. Peterson at school taught us that bullies pick on people because they're scared and sad inside. I think Judge Crawford was scared and sad, but that doesn't make it okay to hurt people." The courtroom was completely silent as Emma continued. "Detective Emma learned that real justice means protecting good people and stopping bad people, no matter how powerful they are. I hope Judge Crawford learns that lesson too, even if it's too late for all the families he hurt." As Emma returned to her seat, there wasn't a dry eye in the courtroom. Even the court reporter had stopped typing to wipe away tears. Judge Williams addressed Crawford directly. "Mr. Crawford, in 35 years on the federal bench, I have never seen such a systematic abuse of judicial power. You perverted the very foundation of our legal system for personal gain. Crawford finally looked up, his pale eyes meeting Judge Williams' stern gaze. The families you destroyed trusted the system to protect them. Instead, they found a predator in judicial robes who sold their lives for profit. Your actions have not only harmed 17 innocent families, they have damaged public faith in the entire judicial system. Emma watched as Judge Williams delivered the sentence that would define the rest of Crawford's life. William Crawford, I hereby sentence you to life in federal prison without the possibility of parole. Additionally, you are ordered to forfeit all assets and property obtained through this conspiracy. The gavel's bang echoed through the courtroom like thunder. Crawford was led away in handcuffs, his 3 decades of judicial power reduced to nothing in an instant. As the courtroom emptied, Agent Martinez approached the Harrison family. Emma, I wanted you to know, Richard Harrison was arrested this morning at his estate in Oregon. He'll be facing trial next month for his role in this conspiracy. Emma nodded solemnly. Good. Everyone who does bad things should face justice. Outside the courthouse, Michael lifted his daughter high in the air, the same gesture he'd made a week earlier when their nightmare began to end. You did it, Sunshine. You brought justice for everyone. Emma hugged her father tightly, then looked back at the courthouse where so much drama had unfolded. Detective Emma's first big case is solved, Daddy. But there are lots more bad people out there who need to be stopped. Michael laughed, amazed by his daughter's resilience and determination. One case at a time, sweetheart, one case at a time. But Emma was already thinking about her next investigation, her sharp mind always ready to fight injustice wherever she found it. 6 months after Judge Crawford's sentencing, life had returned to something resembling normal for the Harrison family. Michael had started a new company, Harrison Justice Solutions, specializing in helping small businesses navigate legal challenges. Emma had returned to 2nd grade, where she'd become something of a celebrity among her classmates. But on this crisp September morning, their quiet suburban routine was interrupted by an unexpected visitor. The doorbell rang at 8:30 a.m., just as Emma was finishing her breakfast and Michael was reviewing client files. Through the peephole, they saw a distinguished elderly man in an expensive suit, flanked by 2 younger associates. Mr. Harrison, my name is Alexander Morrison. I represent the families affected by the Crawford conspiracy. We'd like to speak with you and Emma about a very important matter. Michael opened the door cautiously, Emma peeking out from behind his legs. Morrison smiled warmly at Emma. You must be the famous Detective Emma. I've heard remarkable things about your investigative skills. Emma studied the visitors with her characteristic intensity. Are you good lawyers or bad lawyers? Morrison chuckled. I hope we're the good kind, young lady. We're here because the 17 families whose lives were destroyed by Judge Crawford have come together to create something unprecedented. They gathered in the living room, where Morrison opened a leather briefcase and pulled out an official-looking document. Mr. Harrison, the federal government has recovered $847 million from Richard Harrison's assets and Crawford's hidden accounts. After legal fees and administrative costs, there's approximately $750 million to be distributed among the victims. Michael's eyes widened. That's an enormous amount of money, indeed. But here's what makes this situation unique. All 17 families have voted unanimously to establish the Emma Harrison Foundation for Justice, with your daughter as the inspiration and guiding vision. Emma looked confused. What's a foundation? Morrison knelt down to her level. It's an organization that uses money to help people and make the world better. The families you helped save want to create something that will prevent other innocent people from being hurt by corrupt officials. One of Morrison's associates, a woman named Dr. Sarah Kim, addressed Emma directly. We want to build schools that teach children how to recognize injustice and corruption, just like you did. We want to train young detectives to protect their communities. Emma's eyes lit up with excitement. Schools for detective kids? That sounds amazing. Michael felt overwhelmed. I don't understand. Why would these families give up their compensation to create a foundation? Morrison's expression grew serious. Because your 7-year-old daughter didn't just solve their individual cases, she exposed a systemic problem. Corrupt judges, bought prosecutors, wealthy criminals who think they can purchase justice. Emma's investigation revealed that these problems exist far beyond the Crawford case. Dr. Kim pulled out a tablet showing news articles from around the country. Since your story broke, 17 other judicial corruption cases have been uncovered. Emma's methods, careful observation, detailed documentation, pattern recognition, have become a model for detecting corruption in the legal system. Emma studied the tablet, her young mind processing the implications. Other kids could learn to be detectives too? Exactly, Morrison said. The Emma Harrison Foundation would establish detective training programs in schools, teach children how to identify injustice, and create a network of young observers who could help protect their communities. Michael looked at his daughter, amazed by how her simple curiosity had grown into something with national implications. What exactly are you proposing? Dr. Kim opened a folder filled with architectural drawings and program outlines. We want to build the Emma Harrison Detective Academy in Seattle, with satellite programs in schools across the country. Children would learn critical thinking, evidence gathering, legal basics, and ethical reasoning. Emma jumped up excitedly. Could I help teach the other kids? Morrison smiled. Emma, you wouldn't just help teach, you'd be the chief inspiration officer. Every child in these programs would learn about how Detective Emma saved 17 families by being brave, smart, and determined. But Emma's excitement was tempered by a serious question. Mr. Morrison, what if bad people tried to stop the detective schools? Morrison exchanged glances with his associates. That's a very insightful question, Emma. There are people who benefit from corruption and injustice, and they might not want children learning how to expose them. Then we'll have to be extra careful and extra smart, Emma declared with 7-year-old confidence. Detective Emma isn't scared of bullies, remember. Dr. Kim pulled out one final document, a mock-up of a children's book titled Detective Emma and the Case of the Corrupt Judge. We also want to tell your story, Emma. Children around the world could read about how a 7-year-old girl brought down a conspiracy worth nearly $1 billion. Emma studied the colorful illustrations showing a young girl with a notebook, observing adults in courtrooms and taking careful notes. Will it help other kids be brave when grown-ups are doing bad things? That's exactly what we hope, Morrison said. Michael felt tears welling in his eyes as he realized how completely his daughter's courage had transformed not just their lives, but potentially thousands of other lives across the country. Emma, this is your decision. Do you want to help create these detective schools? Emma looked out the window at her quiet suburban neighborhood, then back at the adults who were offering to turn her childhood adventure into a force for justice across the nation. Detective Emma accepts the case, she announced solemnly, but I have one condition. Morrison leaned forward. What's that, Emma? Every detective school has to have a rule that kids are never too young to stand up for what's right. Sometimes grown-ups forget that, but kids shouldn't. Morrison smiled and extended his hand for a formal handshake. Deal, Detective Emma. Deal. As they shook hands, Michael realized that his daughter's greatest adventure was just beginning. 2 years later, the Emma Harrison Detective Academy had become a phenomenon that exceeded everyone's wildest expectations. What started as a single school in Seattle had expanded to 43 locations across the United States, with international programs being developed in 12 countries. Emma, now 9 years old and in 4th grade, stood at the podium of the Academy's main auditorium, addressing an audience of 500 children aged 7 to 12. Her confidence had grown enormously, but she still maintained the earnest curiosity that had made her such an effective detective. Remember, she told the young faces looking up at her, detective rule number 1, always pay attention to what people do, not just what they say. Actions tell the truth better than words. In the audience, Michael watched his daughter with pride that threatened to overwhelm him. The shy 7-year-old, who had once hidden behind his legs, was now inspiring hundreds of children to become guardians of justice in their own communities. Dr. Sarah Kim, now the Academy's director, joined Emma at the podium. "Children, I want you to hear about some of the amazing detective work your fellow students have accomplished this year." She gestured to a group of students in the front row. Tommy Chen, age 8, noticed that his school's cafeteria money was disappearing and documented evidence that led to the arrest of a dishonest administrator who had stolen $50,000. Tommy waved shyly as the audience applauded. Maria Gonzalez, age 10, observed suspicious behavior at her local bank and helped FBI agents uncover an embezzlement scheme worth $3 million. Emma beamed with pride at her fellow young detectives. Each success story validated her belief that children could be powerful forces for justice when properly trained and supported. But the most significant moment came when Dr. Kim introduced a special guest. "Children, I want you to meet someone very important. This is Judge Patricia Williams, the federal judge who sentenced the corrupt Judge Crawford 2 years ago." Judge Williams took the microphone, her stern but kind face scanning the audience of young detectives. "Emma Harrison and all of you young investigators represent something revolutionary in our justice system," she began. "You're proving that corruption and injustice can't hide from careful observers, regardless of their age." She looked directly at Emma. "Since the Emma Harrison Detective Academy was established, student investigations have led to the exposure of 47 cases of corruption, fraud, or abuse of power. You've saved taxpayers over $200 million and helped send 32 criminals to prison." The statistics were staggering, but Emma's focus was on something more personal. "Judge Williams," she said, raising her hand, "what happened to all the Harrison families that got hurt by the bad judge?" Judge Williams smiled warmly. "That's exactly the kind of question a good detective should ask, Emma. Every single family has been fully compensated and has rebuilt their lives. Margaret Harrison opened a new business. Thomas Harrison's tech company is now employing over 100 people. Every family is not just surviving, they're thriving." The audience erupted in cheers, but Emma had another question. "What about Judge Crawford? Is he still in prison?" Judge Williams' expression grew more serious. "William Crawford will remain in federal prison for the rest of his life. But Emma, something remarkable happened last month. He requested a meeting with federal prosecutors to provide information about other corrupt judges he knew about." Emma's eyes widened. "He's helping catch more bad judges? His information has already led to investigations of 12 other potentially corrupt officials across 3 states. Even from prison, the consequences of your investigation continue to expand." Dr. Kim addressed the audience again. "This is why your work matters so much. Every corrupt official you help expose makes the whole system more honest and fair." But Emma had been thinking about something bigger. She walked to the microphone with the confidence of someone twice her age. "Dr. Kim, Judge Williams, everyone, I think Detective Emma needs to tell you about her biggest idea yet." The auditorium fell silent. Hundreds of young faces focused on their inspiration and leader. "What if we didn't just train kids to catch bad grown-ups? What if we trained grown-ups to be better grown-ups in the first place?" Judge Williams leaned forward, intrigued. "What do you mean, Emma?" "I mean, what if police officers and lawyers and judges and mayors had to take classes from kids? What if they had to promise to a 7-year-old that they'll always do the right thing?" The concept was so simple and yet so profound that it left the adults speechless. Emma continued, her young voice carrying remarkable authority. "Detective Emma thinks that grown-ups forget what it feels like to be small and scared. But if they had to look a kid in the eyes and promise to protect people instead of hurting them, maybe they'd remember." Dr. Kim exchanged amazed glances with Judge Williams. "Emma, are you proposing that we create ethics programs where children train adults?" "Yes, kids know when someone is lying or being mean. Kids know what fair looks like. Maybe grown-ups in important jobs should have to pass a test given by kids." The idea was revolutionary. Children not just as observers of the justice system, but as teachers and guardians of its ethical foundations. Judge Williams stood up, addressing Emma directly. Emma Harrison, in my 40 years in the legal system, I have never heard a more important proposal. Would you be willing to work with me to develop this program? Emma grinned, the same confident smile that had carried her through her first terrifying investigation 2 years ago. Detective Emma accepts the case, Your Honor, but I'll need lots of help from all my fellow detectives. The auditorium erupted in cheers as 500 young voices shouted their agreement. Emma looked out at the sea of determined faces and realized that her greatest adventure wasn't behind her. It was just beginning. The little girl who had once hidden behind her father's legs was now leading a revolution in justice, one careful observation at a time. 5 years had passed since 7-year-old Emma Harrison first noticed something wrong in Judge Crawford's courtroom. Now 12 years old and a 7th grader, Emma stood before the United States Senate Judiciary Committee in Washington, D.C., as the youngest person ever to testify before Congress on judicial reform. The marble halls of the Capitol building echoed with her footsteps as she walked toward the hearing room, flanked by her father Michael and Dr. Sarah Kim. The shy little girl who once carried Mr. Peanuts in her backpack now moved with quiet confidence, her detective notebook replaced by a leather portfolio filled with comprehensive reform proposals. The committee recognizes Emma Harrison, founder of the National Youth Justice Initiative, announced Senator Rebecca Martinez, the committee chairwoman. Emma approached the witness table, adjusting the microphone to her height with practiced ease. Behind her, the gallery was packed with young detectives from across the country, their bright faces focused on their leader and inspiration. Senators, 5 years ago, I was a 7-year-old girl who noticed something wrong in a courtroom. Today, I'm 12, and I'm here to tell you how we can make sure what happened to my family never happens to anyone else again. She opened her portfolio and pulled out a bound document nearly 2 inches thick. This is the National Youth Oversight Protocol, developed by 847 young detectives from all 50 states. We've spent 3 years studying corruption cases, interviewing victims, and designing a system where children help keep adults accountable. Senator James Thompson from Texas leaned forward. Ms. Harrison, can you explain how children would realistically oversee adult officials? Emma's response was immediate and confident. Senator, with respect, you're asking the wrong question. You should ask why we need children to oversee adults in the first place. A ripple of quiet laughter went through the hearing room. The answer is simple. Children see things adults miss. We notice when someone's behavior doesn't match their words. We ask questions that adults are too polite or too scared to ask. And most importantly, we're not impressed by titles or power. We only care about fairness. Senator Martinez nodded approvingly. What specifically are you proposing? Emma stood up, her voice carrying clearly through the microphone system. First, every federal judge, prosecutor, and high-level justice official would be assigned a youth oversight panel of 5 children aged 8 to 14 from their district. These children would observe courtroom proceedings, review case patterns, and report suspicious behavior to a special federal youth advocate. The senators exchanged surprised glances. The proposal was more sophisticated than anyone had expected. Second, all justice officials would be required to attend monthly Ethics Through Young Eyes sessions, where they explain their decisions to children and answer questions about fairness and integrity. Senator Thompson looked skeptical. Miss Harrison, don't you think this could interfere with the serious business of the courts? Emma's brown eyes flashed with the same intensity she'd shown at age 7. Senator, with respect, Judge Crawford thought his business was too serious for a 7-year-old to understand. He was wrong. In 5 years, youth oversight programs have identified 63 cases of corruption that adult authorities missed. She pulled out a chart showing statistics that made the senators lean forward in their chairs. Youth-identified corruption cases have recovered $1. 2 billion in stolen funds, prevented 47 wrongful convictions, and led to the removal of 28 corrupt officials. The question isn't whether children should be involved, it's why they weren't involved sooner. Dr. Kim, sitting in the gallery, wiped away tears of pride as she watched Emma present years of research and advocacy with the skill of a seasoned professional. Emma continued, "But our most important proposal is the National Children's Justice Hotline. Any child, anywhere in America, could call or text when they see injustice. Trained youth advocates would investigate and coordinate with federal authorities." Senator Martinez asked, "How would you prevent false accusations or misunderstandings?" "The same way adult investigators prevent them, through careful documentation, multiple witnesses, and thorough verification." "Children aren't careless with accusations, Senator. We understand that words have power." Emma paused, her voice growing softer but more intense. 5 years ago, 17 families were destroyed by corruption worth $921 million. If there had been a system for children to report suspicious behavior, Judge Crawford's conspiracy would have been stopped in months, not years. She looked directly at each senator in turn. How many families could have been saved if someone had listened to the children who noticed something was wrong? The hearing room was completely silent, except for the soft clicking of cameras capturing this historic moment. Senator Martinez spoke for the committee. "Miss Harrison, your proposals will be given serious consideration. But I want to ask you something personal. What drives you to continue this work?" Emma thought for a moment, then smiled the same confident smile that had carried her through her first terrifying investigation. "Senator, Detective Emma learned something important when she was 7 years old. Being small doesn't mean being powerless. Being young doesn't mean being wrong, and being scared doesn't mean giving up." She gestured toward the gallery filled with young faces. "Every one of these kids represents a family that corruption didn't destroy, a criminal who got caught, or a victim who got justice. We're not trying to replace adults, we're trying to help adults be better." Emma closed her portfolio and looked directly into the television cameras broadcasting live across the nation. "To every kid watching this, you're never too young to stand up for what's right. You're never too small to make a difference, and you're never alone when you're fighting for justice." As applause thundered through the hearing room, Michael Harrison watched his daughter with amazement and pride. The little girl who had once hidden behind his legs was now addressing the entire nation, leading a revolution in justice that started with a 7-year-old's simple observation that something wasn't fair. 6 months later, the Youth Oversight Protocol was signed into law, establishing the first systematic role for children in overseeing the American justice system. Detective Emma's greatest case was complete, but her legacy would protect families for generations to come. Standing on the Capitol steps after the historic vote, Emma looked out at the sunset over Washington, D.C., and smiled. "Detective Emma's work is never done," she said to herself, already thinking about her next case. In the distance, the bells of justice rang out across America, carried forward by the clear, brave voices of children who refused to let injustice hide in the shadows. The little detective who had saved